So the first person who we have speaking today is Tony James from Australia. He's been a member of the National Space Society of Australia since 1994 and is a member of the Australian Space Industry Chamber of Commerce. And the thing that I think is really neat that will make listening to his talk more interesting, I think, or easier to listen to, is that he serves 20 years as a commercial radio DJ at 9 different radio stations. So his voice should be very pleasing, is what I think. He'll be speaking about selling the romance of space in the 21st century.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning. Looks like a lot of people really enjoyed themselves last night at the Apollo 10 banquet. I think they're selling aspirins outside. They might read them a little bit later on. As Carol said, selling the romance of space in the 21st century. First of all, I thought I'd just share my interest in space with you, how it got started from being a radio DJ. How do you transpose that into having an interest in space? And basically what happened was I was doing night radio in Canberra, and the television shuts down at midnight. I'm wide awake. I've been on the radio for 5 hours, didn't know what to do. My wife bought a book for me on space called From Gagarin to Challenger, which was all the manned space program, all the manned space flights between Gagarin and Challenger. And basically my wife created a monster. So I just thought I'd share this cartoon with you. You can't read it. It says, no, there isn't anyone else. I just need some space. And that's basically how we got started. The other thing is, I think we should have an Australian astronaut, so I thought I'd throw this one in as well. If you'll notice on the bottom there, I had a little laser pointer. We call these things here an Esky. I think, what do you call it, a beer cooler here? I don't know what that says about our reputation as beer drinkers, but this cartoon was actually brought out for Paul Scully Powerslide in 1984. He was the first Australian-born person in space. So we'll move on a little bit. Basically, as Carol said, there's my resume. I've had a career in radio that spanned 20 years. I've done some work in television. My tertiary qualifications are in management, marketing and public relations. And I thought that what I might do is try and transpose those career goals from radio into public relations, specifically for space, which is why we brought our company about, Media Space Communications, which was established less than a year ago. We service only the space industry. We don't take any other clients, which is quite interesting due to the fact that we're only operating in a country that doesn't have a space program. But what we found through our market research is that there's a lot of international companies that want to do space business in Australia. So basically that's why we've been established, is to help international businesses come and work in Australia. As you can see, these are some of the clients that we've picked up in the last 6 or 7 months. The company is slowly growing. In the presentation this morning, we'll be talking about the difference between the 60s and the 90s, how they were promoting space in the 60s, how they captured people's imaginations. We're talking about the competition, the different types of things that you have to cut through and ways that you can cut through. And I'll show you quickly how to create an effective marketing and PR plan. Of course, this presentation will be available on our website following our trip to the US when we get back to Australia. I have a short video. If I could ask somebody just to turn the television on and keep playing the video, we'll get started.
Black boy in Chicago, playing in the street. Not enough to wear, not near enough to eat. But don't you know he saw it on a July afternoon? Saw a man named Armstrong walk upon the moon. Young girl in Calcutta, barely 8 years old, flies round the marketplace, see she don't get old. Don't you know she heard it on a July afternoon? Heard a man named Armstrong walk upon the moon. Heard a man named Armstrong walk upon the moon. getting bad. War and hate is killing off the only earth we have. But the world all stopped to watch on a July afternoon. Watched a man named Armstrong walk upon the moon. Watched a man named Armstrong walk upon the moon. And I wonder if a long time ago, somewhere in the universe, they watched a man named Adam walk upon the earth.
It's a lovely day for a launch here live at Cape Canaveral at the lower end of the Florida Peninsula. And the purpose of today's mission is truly, really electrifying.
That's correct, Tom. The lion's share of this flight will be devoted to the study of the effects of weightlessness on tiny screws. Boring! No! The battery!
Now let's look at the crew a little.
Make it stop!
No, not another boring space launch. Change the channel. Change the channel.
I can't!
So what the hell happened in 30 or 40 years to go from all these people standing there watching the launches, especially along Cape Canaveral, just seas of people and cars as long as the eye could see, to, oh no, not another boring space launch. The music, by the way, was by an Australian artist called Reg Lindsay, which was rather a big hit in Australia. He's one of our foremost country music people. I thought it was interesting in the end, I was saying about, yes, we're going to study the weightlessness on tiny screws. I mean, I can imagine why the American people don't want to spend their tax dollars on sponsoring $500 million flights when they're there telling you all these technical things. Oh, today we're going to describe the inside of a ping pong ball, or we're going to try and describe a spiral staircase without using our hands. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to the average person. I really don't want to knock NASA because I had such a great tour yesterday at Johnson Space Centre, but I think maybe they should go back and do public relations 101, specifically targeting your audience. It kind of reminds me of the Bible verse that nearly made the Bible, where Jesus said, "Who do they say that I am?" His disciples replied, "You are the eschatological manifestation of our being upon which we base our interpersonal relationships." And Jesus said, "What?" And the American public, or the global public, as a matter of fact, watch the launches and think, what the hell is all this about? Maybe if they said, lived off of Colombia on a mission to find a way to try and keep people to survive in remote areas, kind of like that New Orleans guy that they just found during the week up in the mountains in the high Sierra. He was out there for 4 days. If you needed blood, there's things that NASA can do to say, look, we can keep this guy alive, either out in the ocean or out in the deserts or up in the mountains. The normal people would understand that and probably support the space program a lot better. So we'll just have a look at the comparison between the 60s and the 90s. In the 60s, of course, exploring space was new. Nothing had been done before. They'd never spacewalked before. They'd never docked before. And of course, they'd never walked on the moon before. The space race on the Cold War was what sold the public basically on having the space race. And dissemination of information in those days, they had the journalists on site. For example, the astronauts could do no wrong, no matter what they did. The information given to the people was easily understood. It was a gee whiz factor. I mean, we saw on the video there a little while ago where people are standing there like that watching the screen, and everybody remembers the tears in the eyes of the people who were watching Apollo 13 trying to get the astronauts there. The information was personalised, as I just said, and dissemination was mainly by newspapers, television, and public speaking engagements by the astronauts. Now we move to the 90s. 40 years later, we've been able to capture people's imagination. There's a variety of reasons for this, but a lot of, especially our younger people, say, so what, you know, they've always lived in a world where there's people been going into space. Old people remember when it was all new, as we saw last night in Apollo 10. And of course, we all know that the space race and the Cold War are no longer valid reasons to go to space. As far as the dissemination of information is concerned, the journalists, you've got to agree, continue to lack interest in a lot of things. Partly I believe that that's our fault because we're not giving them the right information. Also, the information is not personalised for Joe Public. I mean, who cares about weightlessness on tiny screws? You know, you've got to try and, what does it mean to these people? Why should they support it? Now, of course, Joe Public can get his information anywhere. You can jump on the internet, you can watch cable. I saw 60 cable television shows when I was in New Orleans. I couldn't believe it. We've got like 5 or 6 channels in Australia. You guys have just got so much information. So basically, unless you're promoting named astronauts like Armstrong or Glenn, the arrival of alien life, a manned flight to Mars, a return to the moon, or a devastating accident, it's difficult to get coverage. At Media Space, we call it the aliens and astronauts syndrome, because basically that's what the journalists are interested in. If you can't cover those areas, they don't want to know about it. So has the world's population changed their attitude to support for space? I don't think so. Like when you speak to people about their interest in space, they're very interested in what you've got to say. Just look at what happens when you talk to new people. Have we changed the message? No, we still talk about space exploration. We still talk about the fact that what we learn in space we use on Earth, the astronaut experiences, and the gee whiz factor, which is basically what we're talking about in the 60s. So if we haven't changed the message and people are still interested in space, what's changed? Well, I believe it's the access of information. The access to information in the 60s compared to the access of information that we have today. And because there's so much information coming out, what people do with those messages, because they weren't getting nearly the same amount of messages in the 60s as what they're getting today. There's so many other things coming through. Just having a look at the communication over the last 4 decades, this is actually American, not Australian. For example, in Australia, we didn't get colour TV until the mid-70s. We're only just getting cable TV, and I believe we're going to get flush toilets and electricity in the new millennium sometime. That's how slow things are. But as you can see that there's more and more list of things coming through each decade. New ways of getting information. People get information over the email. I mean, for my own business, I would die without the email, the amount of space information that I get. Otherwise, I'd have to go to things like Space News or ISIO or papers like that. In the new millennium, you've got interactive services, video on demand, which they're bringing into Australia. I think I'll watch Armageddon. Press a button, all this other content available, they can watch Armageddon. It doesn't matter if somebody's been watching it half an hour earlier somewhere else. They can pull it straight in as they want. These are the type of things that we've got to address for the new millennium and work out how to get that message across if we're going to sell space. Now this is what you have to come through. First of all, I thought I'd talk about how people think. You've got to understand how people think to get the message across. People's minds are limited, they can't handle many messages at once. So you've got to keep it simple. People also hate confusion, so the simpler the better. The only way around it, the communication explosion, I should say, is to just give them one simple message. For example, return to the moon to stay, which was one of the NSS big things of the last few years. I mean, I thought that was great. That hit people straight between the eyes. 5 or 6 words, you knew exactly what was going on straight from that. Also, minds are insecure. You've got to remember that people think with their hearts, not their head. They don't think logically. So you've got to get them in the heart, not in the head, not what's logical. People's minds don't change. This is most important, whether you're working in business, whether you're trying to get people to come along to chapter meetings or whatever. Once a person's made up their mind, discussion's over. You mustn't forget about it. All right, I'll explain why that is in a couple of seconds. Minds always lose focus. I mean, you could watch people last night at the Apollo 10 conference. I mean, I've been waiting to go to that dinner for about 6 months. And I sit there listening to people, they would say something, and then my mind would wander. For example, I thought Gene Cernan spoiled out of the blue last night about putting a teenager in space. And then all of a sudden I thought, wow, how do we do that? And I didn't get the rest of what he said. Because I just thought, I've never heard anybody come up with that before. What a great idea, seeing space through the mind of a child. Not so much sending somebody that's got a doctorate at the age of 13, but an average American or Australian person who's pretty good at school, could possibly go to university or whatever, sending them into space and telling us what it's like to go to space. What a great idea. So I was thinking about that, and I don't know what the hell Gene said after that, because mine just went off on a tangent straight away. So minds can lose focus. And minds don't think too deeply about much, except money, sex, gossip, and your weight. And as you can see, I think a lot about my weight. Added to that, more information has been produced in the last 30 years than the last 5,000 years. So you look at your access to information on the internet. I mean, the people that are selling CD-ROMs, for example, I reckon they're going to go out of business real soon, because whenever I want information, I just go straight to the net. I don't bother with CD-ROMs. I've got a big encyclopedia arranged at home. Don't use that either, just go straight to the net. Easy to get information. The total of all printed knowledge doubles every 4 to 5 years. So by 2005, how much information is there going to be? And there's an Australian researcher named Hugh Mackay. He's very, very well respected in Australia. And I think he's just starting to get known overseas. And he said that we tend to perceive things that relate to our pre-existing interests and attitudes, and we either support them or refute them. Now, I'd like to give you the source of where I got that from, but I saw him at a radio conference. And I was just madly taking notes as he was talking, so I'm sorry I can't give you a book to get this, but what he said, if you ever see something written by Hugh Mackay, read it. It's very good. If I send you away with a message this morning, this is the main thing I want to send you away with. Hugh said, it's not what the message does to the audience, It's what the audience does to the message, if anything, that determines whether it will be effective or not. Basically, you can send heaps of messages, but if you don't get through to the audience, if the audience just goes, see you later, that's gone, your message is lost. So you've got to work out ways to get people to do something with the message. All right, I'll repeat that at the end of the presentation this morning for you. Hugh basically said that we perceive the world from an inside a cage, it's a protected cage, and we see it our way. All right, he said it allows us to bring our yesterdays into today. We see the world the way we see the world. For example, we're so passionate about space, yet there's other people out there who are not. They see the world differently than what we do. All right, it reflects their view of the world, and people look for messages to reinforce their view of the world. My view of the world is that we should be a spacefaring civilization. Gene Cernan last night said we should send teenagers into space, and I just went, wow, because that's my view of the world. I think the children are our future. So I got onto that one straight away. Whereas he was talking about John Glenn, a 77-year-old, and I thought, well, he's already had his chance in space, and so has a lot of the older people, so that message tended to see you later. That was my view of the world. To put it another way, we have two cats. One's named Turbo, and the other one's named Booster. Booster's a kid, Turbo's about 9 years old. Now Booster, he loves the house, inside the house. But if we put him outside, the first thing he wants to do is come back in the house because he feels safe in the house. However, if we go outside, he'll go out with us, but he'll go out a certain way, and as soon as we go back in the house, he's like a shot. He wants to get back in the house again because it's his protective little cage. He'll go and have a look, taste the world, but he'll only do it if he's got some support there, like with us being outside. Okay, how to get into the cage? If you want to reach the audience, get inside the cage, ask them questions, learn about the people that you want to reach. What's on their mind? Why do they think that way? Once you do, reinforce what's already there. All right, you can't change people's minds. Once the mind's made up, discussion is over. So work out what's already there, what they think about space, and reinforce and build on that. Okay, it's like karate. You've seen the Karate Kid, karate for defense, not attack. Same thing. Don't use the message to attack the audience because you're going to lose it straight away. You've got to use it for defense. Help them defend themselves. So basically the answer is to research your audience, learn what they know, and then build on that and reinforce. A little bit on how people learn, so that when you're giving them new information, how they'll retain it. So basically learning is the difference between retaining and losing information. This is a graph that's been in just about every Microsoft presentation I've ever seen. I thought I'll just steal it and use it for this. But it is so true. People remember a lot more of what they see and hear. For example, you can tell me a lot about what happened at the Apollo 10 meeting last night because there was audio visuals all the way through. You remember watching what was like 30 years ago for the astronauts. You also remember the things that they said because it's a combination of what people see and hear. People remember a little bit less of what they see, a little bit of what they hear, and even less of what they read. For example, if you read 4 paragraphs or 4 chapters of a book, you remember specific instances, but you don't remember it word for word. And that's the reason why you remember just a little bit of what you read here.
You can add another one there of what you do, especially if you're talking about a skill or something.
Right, you're exactly right. Now there's a reason for that. There's a guy named Ebbinghaus who came out with this. Now I'm sorry about the quality of this graph because it's a photocopy of a photocopy of a scan of somebody else around the corner and it's about 8 generations old. But basically, I think of this way as a pointer works, all right? Basically, this is the amount of retention here, 25 and 50%, and this is the time here, an hour, 9 hours a day, and a month. Now, something interesting that I didn't realise until I started researching this presentation, every morning when I drive to work, because I work in Sydney, I listen to a show called AM on the ABC. It's a news show, goes half an hour, they run about 30 stories. But by the time I get to work, I'm lucky if I remember 2 stories. But what's happening? I'm driving, I'm listening real hard, I'm listening to every news story that they say. Why can't I remember it? But it's because it's what I do with the message. I mean, for example, our Prime Minister John Howard, if he's going to be visiting Western Australia to help some plant growers or something like that, what do I do with the message? Out the back door, don't want to know about it because there's so many messages coming. However, if he said, we've just put out the space activities, but we want to make a change, we're not going to let anybody launch from Australia, what happens to my ears? Bang! Straight away, what's going on and why? And that's the reason why I don't remember these things. If you want to enhance learning, make it meaningful. When you're going to use any of your messages, make sure that they relate to either need, lifestyle, or usage. If you don't relate to one of those 3, it's not going to work. People are just going to stick it out the back door. Repetition. Don't give them any interference. Say only it. I remember an ad that came on the Australian TV about 20 years ago. It was a guy with a vacuum cleaner, and he had a bowling ball under it. And he said, 3,000 watts of power. That's why Hoover's ahead of the rest. That was the whole ad. And they repeated it as one. And I remember it 20 years later, I think, what a great ad, it was only 10 seconds long. Limit the message, one at a time. The message for the Hoover people were 3,000 watts of power, that's why Hoover's ahead of the rest. That was the whole message. I don't know about bowling on other people's behaviour and those sort of things. I mean, who wants to suck up a bowling ball with a vacuum cleaner, but also if you can bowl on other people's behaviour. You notice a lot of ads are behavioural ads. They tell stories about how to use products. Right? That's why they do that. And I believe something once leaders never forgotten. They just ran the hell out of the super ad, and I remember it 20 years later. I mean, I could even say with my eyes closed because it's been going for that long. This is based on marketing from my course. I thought I'd put this in because it'll help to repeat the fact that you've got to have a short, easy message. All right? We'll use the return to the moon to the state, for example, or mission to planet Earth. I mean, they're short, easy messages. You know exactly what's going on. Less is more. If you have 3 different messages, it's not 3 messages, it's only a third. You're only going to get a third of your message through. So try and keep it as simple as you can. All right, communicate one message at a time, as I said, repeat it, exactly. You know, how many times, if you run a short 10-second commercial, for example, you've got more chance and more money to repeat it as often as you can. You've got a better chance of getting your message through. Whether people hate it or like it, they see it often enough, they'll remember it. Spread beyond the base only once you reach over lean. So after 6 months of running the Hoover ad, for example, one can say, hey, here's the next level. How about we sell washing machines? Return to the moon to the state, for example. Let's go to the next message. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to try and get there by 2010. We want to set up a habitat ring. We're going to make sure we can keep people alive. They didn't really spread very much on the message until people understood we want to go back to the moon to stay this time. You understand? Always go back to the basic message. Again, you return to the moon to the state. Everything they said went back to that message. We're going to go back to the moon so people can understand. And double the time you think it will take. So if you think advertising, say, for this conference is going to take 6 months, make it 12. Because it will take that long to get through. Alright, let's see how we cut through all this emotional clutter, all the messages that come through. We get something like 5,000 or 6,000 messages a day by the time you look at the newspaper and you see advertising, you see it on Good Worlds, you watch TV, you're listening to what I say, you've got other speakers coming through the day, you're going to get about 5,000 or 6,000 messages today. One of the good ways to get through is to use an analogy. People love stories. For example, what's the name of my 2 cats? Sorry? So by Lucy, told your story, it worked. You remembered my 2 cats. Secret to being remembered, keep it simple. Remember kids, keep it simple, stupid, keep it as simple as possible, easy to remember. There's 5 forms of perceived risk. Also, if you can address one of these, you've got a good chance of getting your message through. People see the risks as being monetary, functional, physical, social, or psychological. If you can address the fear somewhere along the way there, you've got a good chance of getting your message through. And from a marketing point of view, know your point of difference. Right? Why should people be interested in what you've got to say? When you're selling products, say you've got car A and car B here, why is car B better than car A? That's the point of difference. When you're trying to get your message out as far as space is concerned, whether you run a company or whether you're just trying to get people to come along to one of your chapter talks, why would people be interested in it? What's the point of difference? If you know what that is and drive it home, you've got a much better chance of getting your message through. Also, we found out from the graph, listening to a message is far more effective than reading it. I thought this was interesting that people spend up to 85% of their overall time with ear-orientated media, yet advertisers spend 55% of their money on eye media. Now the reason for that is that when advertisers spend their money, they want something they can hold in their hand and look at it real close and go, that's what I spend my money on. Whereas you're much better using audio because people remember it better. Like radio commercials and television commercials, you can't hold it in your hand and look at it. And that's the reason why they don't do it. And the best thing is brand names, of course, like Return to the Moon to the State. I mean, that's a brand name in itself, and you understand exactly what the product was all about, what they wanted to do. Same with Return to Mission Earth. Okay, let's have a quick look at putting the public relations plan together. Carol, give me the wind up, I'm going too long. This is a basic public relations plan. Well, actually, it's a comprehensive one that we do for customers. I don't really want to frighten you, but you need to address all those areas. Which is one of the reasons why my company's here, because you don't want to do it, but you've got to pay me big money to do it. That's the reason why we do it. But to help people specifically put you in the right direction, put you in the right frame of mind, I thought I would edit it somewhat for you, just so the time you address these things, you're on a pretty good track. All right, one of the first things you need to do is have a look at the situation. What's happening with the situation? Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? Which takes you into the campaign goal. What are the other external factors? For example, with this conference, what other conferences are going on? Will people be more interested in spending their Memorial Day weekend doing something else rather than coming to a conference? You need to address the factors that are going to impact on whatever it is you want to do. You need to work out who your target audience is. I mean, who do you want to come to the conference? If we're using that for an example, do you just want chat people? Do you want business people? Do you want the general public? And what are your aims? It gets back to what the campaign goals are. Your audience objectives, this is most important, and I'll tell you why in a couple of seconds, but you want people to act in a certain specific way. Whether you're doing advertising, whether you're talking to people, however you want to get your message out, you want people to act a certain way. So you need to define what you want them to do as a result of what you're doing. All right, in my case, giving you this presentation, whatever you do in the future, will make sure that you're clear in your head that if you want to do an event or you want to advertise something, that you think in a certain way, and it'll be more successful. That's the action that I want you to achieve this morning. What do we want to achieve by the conference? Do we want to send people away happy, feeling, space is really going to be bigger in the 21st century? Do we want people thinking they had a good time? You need to define these things. You need a major strategy. What tactics are you going to use to get your message out? From there, your communication tactics. How are you going to communicate? We'll use the conference again as an example. How are you going to communicate to the people you want to go to the conference? What are you going to communicate to the media? Last night at the Apollo 10 banquet, we had media tables here next door, and I thought, now, what do we want to achieve with the media? Whether we want to send them away thinking about the conference and thinking about Apollo 10 and thinking about the future. A schedule and a budget, most important, because whenever you're holding events, it's so easy to go over the budget. Well, I'll tackle budget first and we'll come back to schedule. With a budget, don't be frightened by that, all right? You don't need an accountant. An accountant will help, but you don't need an accountant. But what you do need to do is make a lot of phone calls. Talk to people who have done the sort of thing that you're trying to do before. Find out some of the ins and outs. Find out how much do they spend. They'll not even put you on to people and say, listen, these guys charge X amount of dollars for a data projector, but if you go here, they'll charge this. There's so many good things that you can find from the budget. Thank you. With a schedule, the easiest way to work out a schedule is to start at the event and work backwards. And that'll ensure that you have enough time. And finally, you need evaluation plans to evaluate whether you were successful or not. You want to know how many column centimetres or column inches, you call it in America, that you got in the press. How much time did you get on radio and TV? You need to know whether you're successful or not. I've only got 3 minutes, so I'll scoot through these. Just quickly with brainstorming, when you're sitting down and coming up with great ideas, defer judgment. There's no good or bad ideas, they're all just ideas. All right, go for quantity, not quality, and think them out later. Be as off the wall as possible. Think about the craziest ideas. People might think, oh, no, that's not going to work, but you might be able to piggyback on another idea, combine the two and come out with the real beauties. And there's no rank with brainstorming. The boss is not the boss. The boss is just a normal person. I think this is in the conference documentation. I hope I supplied it to people. This might help you focus out whatever it is you want to do, whether you want to do an advertising campaign, whether you want to organise another conference, no matter what you do. I've done 2 examples here. One is a business example. We have an Australian Space Development Conference every 2 years and we target business only. The chapter people are invited to come, but it's a business conference. It's not really all chapter people. Our objective is to come to Australia to do business. The message that we want to do, Australia's a great place to come and do space business. And what sort of media do we use? Well, in this case, we'll probably use direct mail. Send them a letter and say, listen, we've got the conference coming on. We'd like you to attend. If you'd like to speak, let us know. Trade magazines, because everybody in space reads Space News, ISIR, all the usual magazines. And telemarketing, ring them up. Hi Carol, there you go. Listen, we've got a space meeting happening in Australia. Would you like to come? If we put it on radio and TV, do you think the message would get across to these people? Not really, because your target's like this big. You've got to narrow your target down and work out what will work for them. In a different one, say at the chapter level, we've got an astronaut talk happening. In our case, my chapter is the Central Coast Space Frontier Society. We brought Dave Scott out a couple of years ago. We were targeting families. We decided we wanted to be a family chapter. So the objective was to see the talk and join the Space Society. The message was, society is a family activity. You don't find babysitters for your kids, you bring them along, we make sure that they're involved. And in that case, we used mass media because we wanted families. We did shopping centre displays and we sent out a lot of flyers. I'm pretty sure that this grid is in the conference documentation. I hope it is. If it isn't, you'll be able to download it from the website. I've run out of time, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I'm really enjoying the conference. Have a great morning. Yeah, I think I have time for a couple of short questions.
Any questions?
Short question.
No, thanks a lot. Enjoy the conference.